So I want to make sure that you're leaving this room today with things that you haven't necessarily heard about. And so everything that I'm sharing with you today is from the lens of being really personally and emotionally invested in you guys, the students, and for the parents that are in the room. The most professional piece of my perspective here is my work in admissions. I was admissions director at NYU. I also worked in admissions at Cornell and the UCs. And in fact, when I was there, I was directly overseeing much of international admissions. Even though these schools have not yet re-required SAT, this is really relevant for the seniors in the room. Test recommended, right? What they're essentially saying is this will be a tiebreaker, okay? If pretend you're admissions officers right now, if you've got two students right next to each other, all things equal, but one did not submit an SAT score and one did, right? And let's assume that the SAT score is high enough. Who do you think is getting in? Trend number 2, legacy. This is very similar to what I just shared earlier about the murky optics, right? Any sort of whiff of privilege, right, is a big flag. You will continue to see this in the news, right? This is being discussed at the national level, and some other states that are discussing it are Connecticut and New York. This is something to keep an eye on, okay? And what does this mean? Why do these 3 things exist? We've got application videos, we've got graded written papers, and we've got interviews. So the problem that they're addressing here are 2. The role of AI, right? I mean, that's a very real problem, right? If we cannot tell that students are using AI in a very heavy-handed way, how do we address that? The other thing is the role of essay coaches, right? Essay coaches, writing teachers, parents, but the type of work and support that we offer students is to make sure that they are ready and they are equipped and they are confident in controlling the factors that you can control. Back in the day, Princeton, we have a very nice looking 17%, definitely not the case today. That's essentially the equivalent of this year's UVA. We've got Harvard at 18%, equivalent of this year's Carleton College. Every school has their own coursework expectations, what high school curriculum would be likely to be taking, everything from foreign language, history, to math, you guys got it. Trends and achievement, okay, that's related to grades. If you have any grades that are perhaps a little bit lower, or any classes that are perhaps not as rigorous, how does that tell a story? Subjective factors, I would say arguably, that is the hardest part of the process, right? Because it requires a lot of introspection. It requires a lot of effort and energy going into discovery of what you might like, what you might not like. It requires a lot of creativity. And then other factors. So this stuff are the things that I was talking about earlier that you cannot necessarily control, right? So this is stuff that's good to know about. High school profile, what is that? So this is literally a profile that every or most high schools and secondary schools send to admissions. Or rather, admissions requires that this be sent to them. So demonstrated interest means you are literally demonstrating interest to a school, right? But some schools don't care about it. Like at NYU, we don't care about it, okay? But some schools do care about it. This is a good reference slide, right? And this is based off of the data our team has collected over the years, but it's definitely not the rule, right? It's not like admissions will straight up just, deny everybody who doesn't have like a 1550. It's great to start here, okay? So these are the questions you have to be asking yourself, because these are the framework and the guiding questions that will help you get at what potentially would I like to explore. What am I genuinely interested in spending my time on? students might not immediately pop out to you as, oh yeah, this student is like a shoo-in for these selective schools. And that's really intentional, right? I want you guys to see where our team shines in supporting students through this process. The catch for this student is they immigrated to the United States when they were in 9th grade. They attended a local school in Taiwan, so their command of English was definitely lacking, okay? They went from virtually not being able to communicate in English to doing all of these things, right? That fundamentally requires a command of the English language. They went to the point of where at the Taiwan University lab, they were translating all the documents from Chinese into English. So all of that, and what school? Let's see, Cornell. First choice, they ED'd to Cornell. Non-US citizen. Darren was a super tough case. And it was to the extent where we actually needed to take Darren to like an anonymous addiction counseling center that literally targeted those that were addicted to gaming. 1450 SAT, right? Going back to that little table that we had earlier, it's a little bit lower than we would like. Definitely a challenge. Entomology literally means like insects, right? So this Darren, you know, as much as he was addicted to gaming, he was obsessed with bugs. Darren was literally not involved in anything at school, right? Because he was gaming all the time. Going back to what I was saying earlier about finding something that you're so passionate about that even after, you know, all the stress of the day and the homework and test preparation and all that stuff, you still want to spend time doing it. That was what bugs meant to Darren. That obsession was something that we supported Darren on in bringing to life in his stories, where the schools were reading about his love for bugs, and even if they hated bugs, they could really feel his passion for it. You know how in a previous slide we talked about the the stuff that you can submit outside of essays? Videos, right? So Brown has an optional video section. So in addition to the essay writing, we were also even better, right? We were able to, or he was able to film himself in the environment, like with bugs. So really being able to bring that literally to life. Case study number 3, we've got Irene, US citizen, nationally ranked fencer. Okay, what does this mean? So the reason why I wanted to share this case study with you is because I want you guys to know about what it means to be a student athlete. This student ranked nationally, competed internationally. But it's not just like, oh, they're a student athlete, okay, like shoo into whatever school. It's really hard to be a student athlete, right? In addition to trying to maintain a 3.95 GPA and getting a 1500 on the SAT, this is a dream that Irene has had, and the dream is to represent Team USA at the Olympics. This is something that Irene truly loves, okay? And in fact, I have a student this year who is also a fencer, and the student has a 1600 SAT, perfect score, and an even higher GPA, literally 3.99 GPA. But this student was not recruited to Harvard, but recruited to Hopkins, which is obviously still very amazing, but not recruited to Harvard because of their ranking, right? They just weren't as highly ranked as this student, for example. Rob loves numbers. Right, that's something that we discovered very, very early on. Just like Darren was obsessed with bugs, Rob is obsessed with numbers. So we talked about ways in which he can incorporate numbers into some of because he has very limited time. as soon as he gets off of school, he needs to go to the restaurant. He decided to be in charge of like the cost management, right? How do I figure out, what my husband, right? Right? All of the different supplies that the restaurant requires, right? The oil that the kitchen needs to prepare the food, et cetera, et cetera. And we brought all of that to life in the application essays that he wrote. I think this just proves that you don't need to be working at like the Four Seasons restaurant or, right? Like this was literally a local white Miami, right? And he was able to effectively communicate his passion. Penn admissions does something a little bit different than other schools. When a student gets into Penn, the admissions officer who read through your application will actually email you, right? They'll be like, oh, like congratulations, et cetera, et cetera. This is something that stood out to me in your application. And the line that stood out to them was exactly this, right? My family's restaurant is open, almost 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm there essentially like every single moment that I'm not in school. And that was what stood out. The reason why I chose these 4 case studies to share with you guys today is because they're obviously all very different, right? They all decided to study different things. They all did very, very different things throughout high school. But the one thing that all of these 4 have in common is how hard they worked. I'm sharing this with you because even though, they might not seem quote unquote outstanding from like a numbers perspective, according to that table we saw earlier, they are in fact outstanding, right? They worked hard, they chased after their dreams, right? They were not afraid to go after their dreams. They were not afraid of the challenges that lied in their way. And that is really what this entire process is about. I know we talked about a lot of blueprints, frameworks, mental models, prioritization, all that stuff. That is just to help guide you to keep this very, this process that's kind of filled with insanity to like be a little bit more sane. But this process is about identity and discovery and character building. And I think these 4 students exemplify all of that. Okay, that's everything. Thank you so much. 谢谢。